Wait, does that say lightning wolves? Yeah, okay, those are definitely lightning wolves. Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, Diablo 4 is full of ways to make yourself stronger, but inarguably one of the strongest ways is gear and the way that it fuels your builds. No matter what your class is, there is one item type that stands above all else really, one kind of item that can full-on create the best builds in the game just by existing and by dropping into your inventory. Uniques. These vary from defensive powerhouses to literally letting you use combinations of skills in synergistic ways that you simply could not do otherwise, and are generally the most powerful singular items you can get. That said, today we're going to go over the best unique items for each class in the game, why they are the best, and why you should be hunting them down if you play that class. Then at the end we'll talk about how to farm more unique items too, so that you can actually focus on looking for these a bit more purposefully. First up, before we dive in, we have already talked about the universal uniques on this channel, the ones that any class can use, and so while uniques like Harlequin Crest giving all skills plus 4 ranks and also damage reduction to you as a whole, or the Grandfather Sword having the potential to increase your crit damage by an insane amount with a max roll, could very well be build defining for every class in a way. These two are also insanely batshit rare drops that not even a handful of players have between them. There's also the Temerity Legs as an example that are just pretty much good for every class, every person as a defensive slot, but not at all build defining. So today we'll be focusing on the class specific uniques, the really important ones, the one that your class can use and no one else can. Starting off then, let's go with the Druid, as it's sort of my own home, my main character. I would say for Druid there are 4 uniques that are capable of creating absolutely bonkers strong meta builds. Some of them are more integral to their build than others, but all of them are insanely strong. First up, the bane of Druid drop tables everywhere, Tempest Roar. This item appears to be just insanely rare. I have heard of Druids level 95 and above who have never found one of these, despite having an entire page of their stash being every other unique in the game. So don't feel bad if you don't have this yet, especially as Druids specifically have a little bit of a messed up loot table where we seem to get far more Barbarian unique items than are actually intended to be dropped. That said, Tempest Roar makes it so all Storm skills count as Werewolf skills, and also gives you lucky hit chance to restore Spirit on hit with a Storm skill. This little combo of affixes on one item straight up enables one of the strongest builds in the game as a whole, which is the Tornado Werewolf Druid. So I would be remiss to not include it on this list, of course. The second Druid one is actually also a helmet, and it's Vasily's Prayer. This one seems to be a fair bit more common, but its effect is actually very similar, if opposite, making all earth magic skills count as werebear skills. You don't need this helmet to play Pulverized Druid in the first place, but if you don't have it in your Pulverized build, it will simply be far weaker than it would be with the helmet, especially as it allows you to keep access to your full kit of skills while in Grisly Rage. The third and fourth ones for this are a bit of a toss-up between them depending on which build that you think is technically better, but it is the 2 unique Druid weapons. Let's start with the Great Staff of the Crone. This one is actually really neat in the way that it affects you, pushing you to make Druid builds based around basic attacks more than anything else. The effect on this makes it so anytime that you attack with Claw, you also cast Storm Strike at the same time, and it also deals more damage than Storm Strike normally would. Obviously, this is quite strong, and if you pair this with loads of attack speed, the damage can get especially silly for a concept like only using basic skills, and I find this quite a fun item, really, for that reason. Last, we have the Waxing Gibbous one-handed axe. This makes it so getting a kill with Shred puts you in stealth for 2 seconds. Breaking that stealth with an attack gives you guaranteed crits for a couple of seconds afterwards. This creates the Bounce Bolt build that I'm a really big fan of that we talked about recently on the channel. It's essentially just Assassin Druid jumping around from enemy to enemy, murdering them in an instant, calling down lightning bolts whenever you get a crit thanks to legendary aspect, but the axe enables this to be the case because it gives you these guaranteed crits. For obvious reasons, 100% crit chance is insanely good, and so this unique item is pretty top tier. After that, let's talk about the Necromancer, where there are a few that are a bit of a big deal, and while again this is mostly on class specific uniques, I should mention the existence of the Penitent Greaves universal unique boots, which leaves a chilling trail behind you and also gives you 7 to 10% bonus damage to chilled enemies. This also interacts really well with the Necro Control Paragon Glyph that gives you 10% bonus damage to enemies that are chilled. So that is a really nice innate synergy that gives you good bonus damage just from boots alone. Past that though, there are 4 really solid class specific uniques for Necromancer, 2 of which actually fuel the same build type, which is Corpse Explosion. Corpse Explosion is the basis of a lot of strong Necro builds. It's just too strong a skill to ignore for the most part, and the uniques that make it even stronger help create what is arguably the strongest current Necro build by a fair chunk. The first of these is Black River. This makes Corpse Explosion consume up to 4 extra corpses in the area, which deals 122 to 130% bonus damage and has a 21 to 25% larger radius per corpse used, which means that this not only makes it easier to pop corpses when you engage a massive pack of enemies, and dozens of them are dropping at a time, but it also does more damage than popping each corpse individually would. This is both great quality of life and convenience, as well as a damage increase, which is just absolutely integral and makes this unique top tier. Then we also have the Howl from Below Unique Gloves 2, which makes Corpse Explosion, instead of exploding immediately, actually create a walking skeleton that goes towards a random enemy to then explode after the fact. But the big thing is that this also increases the damage of Corpse Explosion in general by 30 to 40% based on your roll on the item. So put both of these together in the same build and your Corpse Explosions get absolutely nasty. Not to mention these gloves also have lucky hit chance for fear and also stun, which is especially great against bosses to build up their stun bar ridiculously quickly. The third ultra important unique for Necro is Deathless Visage, which makes Bone Spear leave little patches of damage behind it as it travels, dealing a fair bit of bonus damage too. This one doesn't completely make or break the Bone Spear build by any means, but it does boost its damage a notable amount, especially in exchange for just a helmet slot. Then the fourth for Necromancer is the Blood Artisan's Cuirass. This makes it so anytime that you pick up 5 to 10 blood orbs, depending on your roll, a free Bone Spirit is spawned that deals bonus damage relative to your current life percent. This one is exceptional for 2 different builds actually, being both a main staple of the Bone Spirit builds, but even being really good for a blood build too, as even if you don't have Bone Spirit on your active skill bar, if you have at least 1 point in Bone Spirit, this will still activate from the chest, which is just a bunch of bonus damage even for blood builds.
Because I believe in rewarding people for their efforts.
Third then, today let's spend some time with the Sorcerer, who actually tends to get a lot of benefits from the universal uniques, but that's not to say there aren't a few class-specific ones that are particularly important as well. Arguably the most important one of the bunch is the Raiment of the Infinite. This one is incredibly strong for every Sorc build pretty much. It makes teleport pull in nearby enemies and also stuns them. It increases the cooldown of teleport by 20%, but that is a manageable enough increase given that it lets you just pile enemies on top of each other incredibly frequently, which makes it just a lot easier to deal proper damage to them. And given that pretty much any powerful Sorcerer build uses Frost Nova to apply vulnerable, and that it is a very short range ability, this is a lovely pairing for the vast majority of Sorcerer playstyles. Past that, Sorcerers have another unique that pretty much applies to all builds too, which is Esu's Heirloom. This increases your crit chance by 15 to 25% of your movement speed bonus. It also rolls tons of movement speed on the stats of the boots, and normally boots are good for movement speed anyways. It then helps you get that massive bonus that it has that much movement speed too. Essentially, this is just a big pile of crit chance coming from the boot slot, which is a slot that doesn't often give you damage outside of unique, so again, this makes it quite strong. Most Sorcerer builds would benefit from crit chance as well, so that's all relevant for all of them. Outside of that, there is one slightly more specific unique, which is the Iceheart Brace. These pants make enemies who die while frozen have an 11 to 20% chance to cast your Frost Nova where they died, and obviously, given that Frost Nova is an important part of pretty much any Sorcerer build, this has a ton of potential as well. Not only do you already build up Frost Nova as part of your build, but Frost Nova itself freezes enemies, so anything that you kill quickly after the old Raiment of the Infinite into Frost Nova combo can then combo itself into more Frost Novas and just make a chain of cold explosions. Moving on then, let's talk about the Barbarian. As far as this class goes, there is far and away one unique sitting at the top of the list because it just takes the one biggest glaring weakness of a build and completely erases it, making that build itself into a proper top tier one. After that, really, there's just a pile of situationally decent ones, but that is because Barb's balancing is just a little bit funky right now, especially after the initial patch that messed with their original strongest build. That said, what is the big one at the top? Of course, it's Gore's Devastating Grips. Whirlwind Barbarian is the talk of the town right now. There are so many synergies for this ability in this class, and Whirlwind's one arguable weakness otherwise is single target damage. Gore's Grips make it so when you stop casting Whirlwind, you release an explosion for 16 to 26% of the overall damage dealt during Whirlwind, which, considering Whirlwind can get quite long in endgame gear, is just a massive burst of damage when you let go. You can easily use this to make it destroy boss encounters, and so it is just number one by a fair margin, completely boosting the best build for the class. Even after this unique got a really hefty nerf early after release, it's still totally worth using and arguably the best because of the build it's a part of. Aside from that, we have Fields of Crimson. Bleed Barbarian is arguably the second strongest build going around right now in endgame for this class, which obviously is where uniques come into play, and this unique just makes Rupture leave behind a pool of blood on the floor that not only applies bleed itself, but also makes anything that's standing in it take 10% more bleed damage in general. The downside, of course, is that the target has to be standing in the effect, so this isn't necessarily build defining so much as just a good, solid unique that will boost the damage of the build if you use it right. Then the third one is actually a bit of a funky one, which is Ancient's Oath. I don't think there is a popular build that takes full advantage of what this unique can offer quite yet, and I have some theory crafting of my own that I've been doing around it now that I'm also leveling a Barbarian up, but essentially this makes Steel Grasp shoot out extra chains and also apply a slow for 3 seconds, which is okay in itself, but the big deal with this one is the affixes themselves that combine with it. Steel Grasp as a skill applies vulnerable thanks to the enhancement, and it has multiple charges. On top of that, the damage goes up and the cooldown goes down with skill ranks. This weapon itself, as a unique, also has up to 6 ranks of the skill before upgrades, which is nuts. Plus % bonus damage to slowed enemies, which synergizes perfectly with what it does, plus % vulnerable damage, which not only is an incredibly high value skill, but also synergizes with this skill and it's perfect there, and then plus % damage while berserking, which has some potential synergy for the skill as well. All that to say, you should probably look out for this one. It has a lot of potential, and I'm excited to make this work properly myself when my barb is finally ready for it. Finally, then we have the Rogue. This one is quite interesting because while there are a number of class-specific uniques that make Rogue strong, I'd feel silly if I didn't at least give another little nod over to Penitent Greaves again, the alt-class unique boots that give you a chilling trail behind you when you move and also increase your damage against chilled enemies by 7 to 10%. Rogue, of course, has the passive Frigid Finesse. This just gives you 15% bonus damage to any chilled enemy. Combine that, and suddenly, this unique is a massive damage boost in the boot slot for Rogue, more than most other classes too, and so it's definitely important to actually consider. Aside from that, there are more than a couple of more build-defining uniques specific to Rogue itself. The biggest one is probably Condemnation. This makes core skills do 20 to 40% increased damage as a multiplier, not an additive, when you spend 3 combo points on them. On top of that, it also gives your basic skills a 30% chance on each cast to give you 3 combo points just straight up. This is a self-fueling synergy, and it entirely brings the concept of combo point specialization rogues into the meta, so if you want to play combo points, this unique is extremely important for you, not to mention all the stats that it rolls are incredible. On top of that, there's also Ashera's Conjar. This increases all attack speed by quite a bit, which makes it work pretty well in combination with Condemnation, but the actual stats on the weapon itself aren't great, so while the potential is here, I think it's more just a combo piece with Condemnation than it is anything overly special on its own. I just thought it was worth mentioning anyways. Then finally, we should talk about the Sky Hunter Bow. This makes your first hit on an enemy always a guaranteed crit, meaning the first bit of damage that you do to an enemy that you find, which is nuts because obviously that applies to every enemy the first time that you hit them each time. And on top of that, if you have maximum stacks from the Precision key passive, it also gives you 22 energy as a bonus, which is quite neat, but that can only happen once per cast, not each time that it hits an enemy sadly, but still, even then, that first bonus, the guaranteed first hit critical, is really nasty, especially in something like a penetrating shots build specifically, which is more or less just the go-to if you want to be a ranged rogue. Past that, now that we've talked about which uniques you want for each class, let's talk just a little bit about how to actually get them. There are 2 main solid sources for unique farming currently in the game, one of them with higher drop rates on uniques, but the other one has a bit lower drop rates, but the actual ability to target specific uniques in one specific slot. The first option then is quite simply Nightmare Dungeons. I have done a fair amount of different types of endgame content in Diablo 4, and the one with the highest amount of unique drops has been Nightmare Dungeons. This isn't some data mine stat or anything like that, it's a little bit more feely crafty, but Nightmare Dungeons simply do drop a lot of gear, that is a fact. More importantly, another fact is that at the end of any Nightmare Dungeon above tier 20, you get a guaranteed legendary drop, which is a decent chance to roll as a unique instead. As a result of those things combined, I've just found that the vast majority of the uniques that I've had drop for me have come from Nightmare Dungeons. Outside of that then, if you care more about getting one specific unique item than how quickly you can make just a unique drop in general, you should absolutely focus on Helltide whenever it is available to you. The Helltide has caches that you can open for specific slots, so if you are hunting down one specific unique, you can just open the caches that are for the relevant slot over and over again. Outside of that, the mystery cache in Helltide is actually also quite good. It has fantastic drop rates and almost always drops 3+ legendaries, which have a chance of being uniques each one. I've had chests in the past that drop up to 6 legendaries, so the rate of return on mystery chests is actually really massive here. And that's just about everything then. A nice little discussion about the collection of uniques in the game and which which specifically you want to keep your eyes peeled for each class. Of course, there are more uniques than this, and if you are wanting to do funkier builds, they may be benefited by ones that I didn't mention today at all, but these are generally the most viable uniques as far as being part of the strongest builds for each class, so if you want to make those builds, these are what you're gonna be after. I hope you've enjoyed this bit of a breakdown, and I wish you all the best of luck in getting your own uniques along your Diablo 4 journey. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.